This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by SpyCloud. Stolen data circulating on the criminal underground is fuel for data breaches, account takeover, ransomware attacks, and online fraud. Your biggest security risk might be a breach or malware infection outside of your control that exposes the data of your users. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data sourced from the dark web that power solutions that proactively protect over 3 billion employees and consumer accounts worldwide. Learn how to make recaptured data your best defense at spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. Microsoft updates mitigations for ProxyNotShell. Lloyd's of London investigates a suspected cyberattack. Killnet hits networks of U.S. state governments. The FBI and CISA weigh in on election security. Credential theft in the name of Zoom. Tim Eades from the Cyber Mentor Fund on the move to early-stage investing in times of war and recession. Our guest is Nick Lumsden of Tenacity Cloud on cloud infrastructure sprawl. And the former security chief at Uber was found guilty in a case involving a data breach cover-up. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, October 6th, 2022. Microsoft has updated its mitigations for the two Exchange Server zero-day vulnerabilities, CVE 2022-41040 and 41082, that have been exploited in ProxyNotShell attacks. Dark Reading describes the motivation for the updates. Researchers had determined that the mitigations in their initial form would be too easy for attackers to bypass. The major insurance marketplace, Lloyd's of London, is investigating what it believes may have been a cyber attack on its networks. Reuters quotes Lloyd's terse statement. Lloyd's has detected unusual activity on its network, and we are investigating the issue. We have informed market participants and relevant parties, and we will provide more information once our investigations have concluded. There's no attribution yet, and indeed not much information about the nature of the attack, but Reuters and The Record note that Lloyd's has been a prominent supporter of sanctions against Russia during the present war. The Record observes, Lloyd's representatives would not say if it was a ransomware attack or explain who may have been behind the incident. It has been one of the most notable supporters of sanctions against Russia since the country's government decided to invade Ukraine earlier this year. So, suspicion of a Russian cyber attack is in this case a matter of a priori probability, of speculation informed by track record and imputation of motive. On the other hand, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence either. But in this case, it's too soon to tell. Another story clearly does involve Russian operators. Killnet, the Russian hacktivist group, nominally independent but obviously acting on behalf of Moscow's security services, has knocked some U.S. state government services offline, CNN reports. Colorado, Kentucky, and Mississippi at least were affected, with some services sporadically rendered unavailable yesterday in DDoS attacks. Kentucky's Board of Elections was one of the sites disrupted. The story is still developing, but the effects of the attacks don't seem to have risen above a nuisance level. Killnet has hitherto been best known for conducting DDoS attacks against lightly defended targets in European countries Russia deems too friendly to Ukraine. The U.S. FBI and CISA have issued a public service announcement stating that cyber activity is unlikely to disrupt or prevent voting in the U.S. The statement reads, As of the date of this report, the FBI and CISA have no reporting to suggest cyber activity has ever prevented a registered voter from casting a ballot, compromised the integrity of any ballots cast, or affected the accuracy of voter registration information. Any attempts tracked by FBI and CISA have remained localized and were blocked or successfully mitigated with minimal or no disruption to election processes. The Bureau and CISA reassure the public that measures are in place to ensure the integrity of the vote against potential cyberattacks. Their advisory states, "The public should be aware that election officials use a variety of technological, physical, and procedural controls to mitigate the likelihood of malicious cyber activity, things such as phishing, ransomware, denial of service, or domain spoofing, affecting the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of election infrastructure systems or data that would alter votes or otherwise disrupt or prevent voting." Their advisory says, "Given the extensive safeguards in place and distributed nature of election infrastructure, the FBI and CISA continue to assess that attempts to manipulate votes at scale would be difficult to conduct undetected." Bleeping Computer notes that the most pressing threat to elections are influence operations, especially influence operations on social media. That's a threat of a different kind, however, not a threat to counting the vote or ensuring that ballots cast are properly registered and tallied. Armor Blocks released a blog today detailing a Credential phishing attack impersonating Zoom. Researchers report that the attack had a socially engineered payload that bypassed Microsoft Exchange email security and targeted over 21,000 users before Armor Blocks stopped the attack. The phishing email said that there were 2 unread messages to be checked on Zoom, with a malicious link for the call to action button, as well as a malicious link for the unsubscribe button. The call to action button, if clicked, would lead to a fake landing page that appeared to be a Microsoft landing screen. Victims were prompted to enter their Microsoft account credentials to view the messages. This attack leveraged a well-known brand's identity in order to harvest credentials, utilizing Zoom's legitimate logos and branding to instill a sense of trust. It's worth noting it did not involve any compromise of Zoom itself. The hackers also used social engineering, such as the email, title, and design to induce a sense of urgency. The attack bypassed all Microsoft Exchange email security measures and used a valid domain that received a reputation score of trustworthy, with only 1 infection reported in the past 12 months. And finally, former Uber security chief Joe Sullivan has been found guilty of covering up a 2016 data breach, as well as concealing information on a felony from law enforcement, Security Week reports. The month-long trial resulted in a verdict that could put Sullivan in prison for up to 8 years, a maximum of 5 years for the obstruction charge, and a maximum of 3 for a misprision charge. The New York Times reports that it took more than 19 hours to reach a verdict in the case for the jury of 6 men and 6 women. David Angeli, an attorney for Mr. Sullivan, comments with disappointment on the verdict, stating, "While we obviously disagree with the jury's verdict, we appreciate their dedication and effort in this case. Mr. Sullivan's sole focus in this incident and throughout his distinguished career has been ensuring the safety of people's personal data on the Internet." Benjamin Kingsley, an assistant U.S. attorney, said during closing arguments that Mr. Sullivan took many steps to keep the FTC and others from finding out about it. This was a deliberate withholding and concealing of information. It's thought unlikely that the sentence will be anything close to the maximum, but it's a striking sign of how seriously federal authorities are taking cases related to data breaches. After the break, Tim Eades from the Cyber Mentor Fund on the move to early-stage investing in times of war and recession. Our guest is Nick Lumsden from Tenacity Cloud on cloud infrastructure sprawl. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. And now, a word from our sponsor, Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Legacy device management tools like MDMs force disruptive agents onto employee devices that slow performance and treat privacy as an afterthought. Collide does things differently. Instead of forcing changes, Collide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions to solve the issue. Collide can help you build a culture where everyone contributes to security because everyone understands how and why to do it. For IT admins, Collide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor the security of your entire fleet, whether they're running on Mac, Windows, or Linux. That visibility makes it easier to prove compliance to your auditors, customers, and leadership. You can meet your compliance goals by putting users first. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to find out how. That's KOLIDE.com/CyberWire Daily. And we thank Collide for sponsoring our show. Data storage is cheap, it's fair to say. And these days, as organizations move more and more of their business to the cloud, often making use of multiple cloud providers, it's easy to understand the challenge of keeping tabs on all that data. Nick Lumsden is CTO and co-founder at Tenacity Cloud, and he provides insights on preventing cloud sprawl.
Cloud sprawl is the unintentional expansion of infrastructure over time, and it especially becomes a problem as changes increase, which has happened just, due to infrastructure turning into software. So, changes that used to be quarterly or monthly have now become, 20 years later, dozens or hundreds of changes a day, sometimes thousands, and really, sizable organizations. And, also we've opened up the number of people that can make changes. It used to be in the hands of someone who was a deployment manager or someone who administered a system. And now it's, if you write software, like myself, you can be making changes all the time via the software because infrastructure is now code and it's now a part of the software. And this has resulted, that expansion of responsibility and, take time dilation into effect there. And you end up with resources that are deployed in infrastructure that just continue to linger long after they were useful, or sometimes they weren't even useful. They were a mistake and they just sit out there as attack surface on and on and on forever and ever.
Do we have a certain amount of empathy for folks who find themselves in this situation?
Of course, because I'm one of those folks. 25 years, 25 years in managing infrastructures, writing software. If there's a mistake to be made, I've made it. I've definitely created data sprawl in organizations where we were doing data analytics, and suddenly there's terabytes and of data that's replicated and forgotten about. And it's if it's secure, if you're not paying attention, that's a problem. Make effort to go clean that up. And I totally empathize with the pace of change. And also, frankly, that there's just not enough folks to do the work and to meet the demands of most organizations. I can honestly say in IT or in technology, I have yet to meet the person that is paired with exactly the amount of work that needs to get done in a given day. It's usually twice as much or more, and they're trying to pick what the priority is.
So what's the fundamental issue here? I mean, how should folks come about getting their arms around this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to consider. First of all is understanding that over time, this problem gets a whole lot worse. And so when you start your cloud journey, whether you're starting, you're in the middle of, or you've already transitioned and you're now living in the cloud, at all points in that journey, it's important to sort of get your arms around this issue, though maybe there's different approaches in each of those scenarios. It's not about just the human element of we need to have the engineer go clean it up. There's so many hands in that pot, and there's so many more important things for them to do, really making sure that we have tooling to help us with it. Whether that's being on the path towards DevOps, which helps turning infrastructure into code and keeping it consistent. That's one way. Doesn't do the whole trick, but it's one way. But also having platforms that help you discover what's going on inside your environments, actually looking at utilization, understanding what's been disassociated in the environment, what's no longer being utilized, what's been abandoned or orphaned from its original use. Just understanding that can start to learn the context of an app and really understand, all the components, all the assets, and give the user indication as to, hey, you should go look here. Or even go insofar as to say, hey, let me auto-optimize this for you. Let me inject into your dev channel, what needs to be cleaned up. So I think there's a number of approaches you can take. Certainly we at Tenacity are working on this problem. We look at the problem of optimization in the cloud as kind of a core issue. And, we pull in the metadata about cloud environments, analyze them, and, try to get really, really, really smart and smarter every day about what sorts of indicators there are that the infrastructure is out of use and needs to be optimized in order to help the world, both from optimize your cloud and reduce attack surface, but also it helps optimize cost. It's a win-win-win all the way around.
Are there any common elements that you see with organizations that have a handle on this, that are doing things right?
So it depends on it depends on what scale the organization is at. Those organizations that are at scale, the enterprise and upper mid-market, they likely have an initiative that's driven from executive level. And they may even have teams built around this that are focused on the optimization puzzle, focused on, kind of the security footprint from attack surface perspective, that really understand cloud, really understand, kind of security ops and FinOps and how the two come together. And so there's a concerted effort there, and you're going to see them leveraging AI tools, analytics tools that are really going to help them do better in their business. And Tenacity is one of those tools. At the mid and smaller market, when you look sort of at those organizations that are still trying to get to scale, or maybe are startups that are moving quickly, it's about getting your arms around kind of this problem early on and knowing what key metrics you need to watch before it gets out of control. I can tell you that every organization we've ever deployed into has had room for optimization. In some of the most egregious, we're spending 5 and 6 figures a month on infrastructure that was just laying around, and they couldn't believe it when it was found or when it was detected. It was no way. There's no way that's happening. And of course, it was happening, and it was cleaned up, and the environment was made safer, more secure, and better optimized. But there just wasn't a key metric around, say, QA or dev resources. Why has their budget quadrupled over the past year? That would be a key indicator that there's some sprawl going on.
That's Nick Lumsden from Tenacity Cloud. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Tim Eades. He is the co-founder of the Cyber Mentor Fund and CEO at vArmor. Tim, it's always great to welcome you back.
Great to be here, Dave.
These are certainly interesting times on the global stage as we look at a war and the possibility of recession. How does that affect the investors out there? How do they look at this sort of thing?
That's a great question. It's amazing. Last year, obviously, valuations reached crazy high numbers in security, and particularly in private companies. where the valuations and the multiples were off the charts. I think the right place to go at that time was to go, it's a bit like the opposite in politics. When valuations go crazy high, we go crazy low. Cyber Mentor Fund has invested in 29 companies over the last 3 years or so, and we believe in the crazy guy that wants to start something new, that has incredible domain permission, that's curious and kind. And we will lean into those young emerging startups because they want to break out, that the legacy tools are showing their age, and they want to do something different. And so those are the people that we've been investing in over the last few years, because as these valuations get completely carried away and they raise so much money, hundreds of millions, 200 million, 300 million on a round of funding, which is essentially like a private IPO, my orientation is always to be lean into the young up-and-coming startup, do what you can to help mentor and provide guidance and get these new technologies to market so that we can better secure the country, better secure the enterprises within it, and give these entrepreneurs a better chance of success. And so, it got out of control with the valuations last year. And I think even this year, it's been a little bit like whiplash. At the RSA show earlier this year, everybody was doom and gloom. But, in the last few weeks, you've seen crazy valuations come back with talent raising 100 million and stuff like that. It's like on a Series A. So, there's so much money floating around in the investor community still. I think good discipline is always required. But in times like these, you should go low. You should help these young early stage startups. And seed is the better place to be, seed and Series A.
What's your advice for those people who are looking to make a splash, for that person who thinks they have that great idea that's going to help make the world a better place? In this environment, are there any specific things they should be doing to make themselves more attractive to investors like yourself?
Another great question. Yeah, I think we invest in companies, in people early on and teams early on with domain expertise. Understanding your domain expertise, whether it's industrial controls or authentication, or understanding how mainframes roll over and fail over, and whatever it may be, the domain expertise of the founders is absolutely critical. The passion and the knowledge of that is, you just can't build a company without that. And so that's the biggest one. Lean on that, be articulate about that, understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve in industry. Make sure that doing nothing is not an option for the customer, that they can't just sit there and do nothing. Focus on a meaningful problem, focus on a growing problem that they have incredibly good and deep domain permission for, that when you talk to a customer, they have to do something about it. And by doing that, you lean into the right VCs, such as Cyber Mentor Fund, that does this early stage mentoring, and you will always get funded in that scenario.
We've seen some stories come out that there have been a number of companies who have been going through some rounds of layoffs. How concerning is that to you? How do you read that?
I don't think that's concerning at all. I think you have to tighten your belt. You have to understand, your burn rate, your cash runway. And I think, managing to that is a really smart and shrewd thing to do. I think frugal companies always go further. So it doesn't concern me at all. I think it's healthy, to be really honest. Because we don't know how long, the war in Ukraine is going to happen, what's going to happen with China and Taiwan. We don't know how long it will take to get in control of inflation. So, tighten your belt, be frugal, lean in, look after your customers, and you'll be fine.
All right. Well, Tim Eades, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.
We want to thank our sponsor, Keeper Security, for helping make this episode possible. Keeper is the world's most secure password manager for organizations. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfin, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, AlertLogic. The defining characteristic of a managed detection and response service is its focus on delivering a meaningful security outcome, meant to ease both pre-breach and post-breach concerns. Maximum visibility and the ability to detect and respond to threats combines with capabilities to minimize the impact of vulnerabilities, configuration issues, and attacks. An effective MDR solution must address both. AlertLogic is the only MDR provider that delivers comprehensive coverage for public clouds, SaaS, on-premises, and hybrid environments. Their cloud-native technology and white-glove team of security experts protect your organization 24/7 and ensure you have the most effective response to resolve whatever threats may come. AlertLogic is the industry's first SaaS MDR provider with purpose-built technology and security experts that help identify and respond to cybersecurity breaches, providing complete compliance solutions that give customers peace of mind and deliver on best practices. Learn more about how AlertLogic's MDR can provide complete coverage for your most critical assets at alertlogic.com. That's alertlogic.com. And we thank AlertLogic for sponsoring our show.